Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
All right, thanks a lot, Jessica, and thank you for tuning into the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Rich Walsh. I'm your host tonight. Chris Mueller's on the other side over at the 93.7 The Fan Cam. We'll get to him in a matter of moments, but we're taking your phone calls tonight at 412-575-2600 is the number. We definitely have a lot to talk about. Kind of a slow day in sports, but still some Steelers news leaking out. Are they getting closer to an offensive coordinator? One thing that they did do in the last 24 hours was re-sign Terrell Austin with a 2-year deal to be their defensive coordinator. I think that was a good move, Chris. It keeps some stability. I think the team, it dealt with a lot of injuries on defense. And when they have Watt and they have these guys healthy, this could have been one of the top 3 defenses in the NFL. But they still ranked, 6th or 7th, tied for 6th, giving up 19 points a game. So they allowed a lot of yards, but not as many points as some of these other teams out there.
Yeah, but they allowed points to good teams when they played them in good offenses. They had to go into Seattle and outscore the Seahawks. It wasn't like the defense held down the opposition there. The Bills effortlessly glided to 21-0 in that game. I'm aware that there were injuries, but other than a handful of games I could point out against what I would consider quality opposition, the second half against the Rams being one noteworthy one, I really felt like that defense was not even close to the 6th best defense in the league. Even though that number is what it is as far as points allowed. I know Terrell Austin's a really good dude. I think everybody over there likes him, but I'm still dejected or whatever you want to call it, or disappointed that the team let Brian Flores walk out the door and didn't just hand him the reins to the defense. I know that's Mike Tomlin's baby. I know he loves that side of the ball, but this would be a better team right now if Brian Flores was here and was the defensive coordinator actually running things on Sundays.
But don't you think you need some stability over there? You need to keep some of these coaches around. I mean, I think Austin is well-liked over there.
He is well-liked, but stability's overrated. Stability. That's what this franchise likes to tell everybody they kind of corner the market on. They were so stable at offensive coordinator when they wouldn't fire Matt Canada until it just became like a boiling point situation. So stable before that with Randy Fichtner. I'm tired of the idea that stability for its own sake is a good thing. I think the Steelers could find a better defensive coordinator out there. Like I said already, Terrell Austin's a good guy, but I wish they had just a more up-and-coming guy at that position, or again, Brian Flores at that position.
Hopefully that's the direction they head with offensive coordinator. So let me ask you, do you think that Mike Tomlin will eventually be the CEO of the Steelers? Will he give up the reins on defense and just let his coaches coach at some point? Do you think that's going to happen on offense? At least
I'm hopeful that whoever they hire, that person is allowed to do what they want to do. The reports about Thomas Brown, who I do think is a really good candidate, were that when he was with the Rams, Sean McVay really liked him and took to him because he was willing to challenge McVay. I don't know how Tomlin would handle that from a young coach. I hope he would respect it. I hope if they hire anybody that they hire is going to be allowed to work with autonomy on that side of the ball, particularly when it comes to overall philosophy, that they just can't be this conservative group. As to your first question about Mike Tomlin ever taking on a CEO role, I think he is a really knowledgeable defensive guy. This is not in any way to slight him. I think if he was just a pure defensive coordinator for a team, he would be among the league's very best. But being a head coach requires your attention in a lot of places. I think that hurts him on game day as a defensive signal caller. I wish he would do that, give the reins over to somebody capable. But I think the only way that he becomes a CEO, the way you're describing, Richie, is if it's more or less forced upon him by Art Rooney, which it will not be.
He was only a defensive coordinator for 1 year, right? That was it before he got the Steelers job.
With Minnesota, yeah. But, I mean, I think the man knows defense back and front. I think he knows all aspects of football, but I do think Mike Tomlin is an elite defensive mind. I do think he understands how to slow good offenses down sometimes. I think his relative dominance over Lamar Jackson on an individual level is largely a byproduct of him coming up with little tweaks and things that help the Steelers. But again, I would much rather almost every coach in the league be a CEO type and entrust the play calling duties on both sides of the ball to somebody who only does that thing, but that really doesn't happen.
Yeah, surround yourself with good people, the right people, and you might see some success. You know, you brought up Sean McVay's name, and I was just looking at this tweet by Warren Sharp, who has a great Twitter account. I love following Warren Sharp, and I'm sure you saw this. But 2013, the Washington Commanders, then it was the Washington Redskins, had Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, Raheem Morris, and Bobby Slowick, all on their coaching staff, and they went 3-13.
That was, I mean, their failures there should make it very clear that Dan Snyder is the worst owner in NFL history, and it might not be a close second unless it's somebody who's done something overtly criminal. But yes, an incredible amount of brain power and coaching know-how on that staff for truly a hideous football team.
All right, we're taking your phone calls tonight, 412-575-2600. I do want to ask you one question, but I'll ask you it after the break about the Steelers, if there's any pressure from the fans to make some changes and what Art Rooney thinks. I want to hear your opinion on that. Coming up next, stay right there. All right, welcome back. This is our GMC tweet of the night from Albert Breer, the 2024 NFL coaching carousel. You have Harbaugh. The Commanders haven't hired anyone. The Falcons just hired Raheem Morris, so that means Bill Belichick's out. Dave Canales, Gerard Mayo, Antonio Pierce, Seahawks still looking for a coach, and Brian Callahan. Who do you think's the most intriguing of that list so far, and when do you think the Commanders and the Seahawks are going to finally get someone in there? They're going to wait till these games are over?
I do think the most interesting name on that list is just Harbaugh going to the Chargers. It's a constantly and perpetually star-crossed franchise that almost always has great rosters and great talent and underwhelms with that great talent. Harbaugh's a total grade A weirdo and certainly became more of one when he was at Michigan, just an odd duck. But the man knows how to coach, and he is the rare guy that knows how to coach at both the NFL and collegiate levels. He starts at San Diego, he ends up at Stanford, then he goes to the Niners, then he goes to Michigan. He's going to succeed with the Chargers. He's going to get the most out of Herbert. That roster that always looks so good is finally going to match it, I think, on the field. But I think the most interesting thing about that list that you named, Richie, is not one of the names on it. It's one of the names not on it, Bill Belichick. I mean, I think people took it as fait accompli that the minute he and the Patriots parted ways, that the seas were going to part for him and he was going to find a job. Either the Falcons would want him or Jerry Jones, God bless you, Richie.
Thank you.
That Jerry Jones would fire Mike McCarthy and bring in Bill Belichick. I'll make a prediction here. I think I'll say like 90% sure Bill Belichick won't coach in the NFL again unless there's a huge upset this year and he gets that Commanders job or that Seahawks job. And I really don't think he'll get either one. If he goes a whole coaching year without coaching a team, then I don't think he's ever coming back. I don't think many teams want to hire a guy who at that point would be close to 75 years old who wants full personnel control and is a defensive guy who hasn't always hired very good offensive coaches around him, particularly recently. I think we're just finding out that the bloom is very much off the Belichick rose when it comes to other teams actually looking to fill a vacancy.
Yeah, I was just thinking if he doesn't get hired by one of those two teams, and I think it would be a long shot. They're not going to pay a guy like him $18 million to come there. But potentially next year, and you mentioned the age factor, which I think is a huge factor, but with the Cowboys, if they ever got rid of McCarthy, would they look at a guy like Bill Belichick?
Hypothetically, Richie, just for argument's sake, let's say Detroit's Ben Johnson doesn't get a job this hiring cycle, although I think he very well could get one of the two that are remaining. Let's say that hotshot offensive coordinator doesn't get it, right?
Yeah.
If you are the Cowboys and you want to move on from McCarthy, do you want to hire him? Or you want to hire Belichick? Or say Bobby Slowick ends up shut out this round because, frankly, there aren't enough spots and there are a lot of attractive candidates. And let's say C.J. Stroud has a huge year for the Texans next year, and they look like one of the NFL's best teams. You're telling me then in that particular situation that Jerry Jones wouldn't jump at the chance to hire the guy from Houston and bring him over to Big D and coach the Cowboys? I don't know. I don't see any team that really would want to bend over backwards to hire a guy because at this point, in a way, crazy though it might sound, I think Belichick has baggage. Teams can look at him and say, you want all this control. You won all this money. You're a defensive guy in an offensive league. What have you done without Tom Brady? And Belichick, other than one pretty humiliating defeat in the playoffs, in fact, really humiliating, can't point to much these last 4 years.
And age is a huge factor there. Okay, so the question that I did want to ask you, I know that the Rooneys don't succumb to fan pressure, but do you think, the Matt Canada, I think, was kind of forced a little bit. The fans had something to do with it, I believe. But do you feel like the next offensive coordinator, do you feel like the Rooneys or anyone over there is feeling pressure from the fans that they need to bring some hotshot young guy that's going to throw it around the yard out there?
I don't think that they're feeling pressure from the fans to do that. I think they're going to do it, though, because I think they have finally, collectively, and probably Mike Tomlin was the last one, because I think he's a stubborn, old-school Belichick-style guy who believes he can win his way. I think they finally came to the realization that they were living in the past when it came to the NFL and offense and how it's played anymore. So I think everybody over there that's involved in the brain trust knows that they need a guy who's going to open up the offense, who's going to take it out of those kind of conservative restraints that it was in, and who's going to be able to put more points on the board. I don't think fan pressure has anything to do with it. I think it's a common sense observation about your lot in the NFL. Yeah. They were the one team coming into the playoffs, Richie. I don't even think you could have squinted, no matter how optimistic you were about Mason Rudolph, and seen them making any kind of a run, mainly because their offense felt so limited.
I was just trying to compare it to the Pitt situation, because there's no question in my mind they felt the pressure. They needed to do something, and they wanted to bring something in that would put fans in the seats. I know the Steelers don't have the problem because they're sold out, but at some point, the fans are going to stop going if they're seeing their offense score 13 points.
I mean, if you go like 10, 12 years without a playoff victory when you're supposed to be the standard of excellence in the NFL, then yes. I'm not sure you'd necessarily see fans start to leave en masse, but I think you would take a little bit of a merchandising hit. I just think in terms of how you'd run any business would not be going as well if you let this continue apace, and it just became, I would say, pretty evident to everybody observing the Steelers that they were stuck in the mud and needed to try to extricate themselves. And I think making an exciting hire at coordinator and then either finding out what you've got or don't got with Kenny Pickett this year and making a decision after that based on what you find out is the right way to approach this. I think if they wanted to, I wouldn't fault them one bit, and I would probably advocate for it. They could be even more aggressive when it comes to how they handle the quarterback position. They're not going to do that. But I don't think anybody on the outside looking in and the rest of the NFL would blame them if they did.
Do you think time's on their side with this hire? Do you think that they're feeling the pressure to get this offensive coordinator hired soon, or do you think that there's time here the next couple weeks? Because the NFL calendar doesn't even start till March. You want someone in place way before then.
I hope that Mike Tomlin, when he goes down to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, is trying to conduct some interviews down there as well. And that, Omar Khan, everybody that's going to be involved in the interviewing process is doing that, because I do think time is somewhat of the essence here. Zach Robinson, who a lot of people felt like was the best candidate that's been named so far, there's a chance Raheem Morris brings him onto his staff, because I think that's one of the things you see with defensive coaches who get hired as head coaches. DeMeco Ryans paved the way with that. He brought in Bobby Slowick. That really helped his transition. Ryans was able to do his thing as a defensive signal caller and kind of not worry about the offense. If Morris has learned from kind of his first flame out in Tampa, then he's going to bring a capable offensive mind with him so that he can focus on the things he does best, defense especially, and just kind of being a CEO. So I think names that they might want might get plucked here by some of these new head coaching hires, and I do believe that based on that, Richie, time is in fact of the essence.
Do you think there's a name out there that we don't really know about, that we haven't heard yet, that could be kind of an under the radar, kind of like Mike Tomlin was hired? No one expected that to happen.
Do you consider Gerard
Kellen
Johnson?
Moore wouldn't be, but I'm surprised his name hasn't been floated around, or we haven't heard anything from the inner circles over there.
I'm still annoyed that they haven't, to my knowledge, done anything to try to contact Gerard Johnson, who I know has been getting deep into the offensive coordinator interview process. I mean, that guy helped pave the way for C.J. Stroud to have the year he had this year. I think Stroud came out of college much closer to a fully finished product than any of us realized, but you've got to tip your cap to the position coach there too, for helping smooth out any little bumps in his game that he would have had coming from college to the pros. That's a name I've been beating the drum for. But I think so far, what's notable to me is that almost all the names we've heard seriously connected, at the very least, have reputations as good offensive minds. Like, there's no underwhelming, really terrible names out there. I think Cliff Kingsbury actually is the one people are most kind of down on, and that says something because I do think Cliff Kingsbury knows offense.
He does, but his record doesn't indicate that.
Well, Thomas Brown's doesn't either.
You're right.
I think we can forgive.
Yeah.
We can forgive that, and I choose to forgive that because, frankly, Thomas Brown was laboring under, right now, the worst and most impulsive, rash owner in the NFL. David Tepper made a complete mess of it there in Carolina, and so I don't really hold anything that happened to Thomas Brown or Frank Reich against them because a lot of what I heard suggested that Reich and that entire coaching staff liked C.J. Stroud better and had Bryce Young forced upon them.
Yeah. Probably the worst roster in the NFL right now. All right, we got to take a break. Back with some of your phone calls coming up next. Stay right there. Sorry, before we go here, Chris, I wanted to ask you, I got a tweet here from Sean Kramer, and he said, what's your grade for Dubas so far? Who else is likely to be traded besides Gensel? No consistency with this team as currently constructed. They're back in action tomorrow against Florida.
I would give him a D for disappointing because the biggest blockbuster move he made was bringing in Erik Karlsson. Granted, I think Erik Karlsson only wanted to play for the Penguins, which made facilitating such a deal easier, but he's been a disappointment, and so I have to give Dubas a pretty harsh grade in light of that. You can argue he knew what he was getting into when, he knew that they wanted that all these guys were going to be back, that they were going to maintain the core. He added a huge name to it, a defending Norris Trophy winner. And that guy has been a letdown. So I give him a pretty harsh grade. They need to get themselves going in a big-time hurry, or this is going to be a lost season and I think the real start of a downturn. Imagine where they'd be if Sidney Crosby wasn't playing at the level he was.
Yeah, 7 points back in the wild card. Real quick, do they have a shot at making the postseason here, and do you think that they trade Gensel?
They have a shot at making the postseason. They need to go on some kind of 8 or 9-0 run. I mean, they really do need a big winning streak with the way the NHL's point system is structured. Do I think they trade Jake Gensel? Yes, I actually think they do, and I think that would be a wise move. Is this team going to win a Stanley Cup with or without him? I doubt it.
All right, thanks a lot, Chris. I agree with you. I'll see you later, and hopefully I see you guys over on KDKA News right now.